Hi and welcome to Chattanooga's Virtual Medica 2020. In these very challenging times, we're having to adapt. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Cliff Eaton. I'm a chartered physiotherapist and I have a remit with Chattanooga to provide international clinical support and education. Along with me today, I have Craig Wilson. Craig is also a physiotherapist. And today we're going to be teaching him about the clinical use of radial pressure wave for the lumbar spine and also using ultrasound for treating osteoarthritis of the knee, for which Craig has a big interest. And hopefully Craig is going to answer the questions that you would have come to ask me on the stand in Dusseldorf. Okay, so let's get started. We can have the next slide. Okay, so we're going to start with what is a shockwave. There we go. I thought I'd wake everybody up by starting with that. Look, so how is a shockwave produced? Look, if the sound source is stationary, then it's going to emit pressure waves equally out from the source. And these pressure waves are what we pick up in our ear and we interpret as sound. But if the sound source is moving, then the pressure waves in front of the moving object start to become compressed. And if the moving object actually goes faster than the sound of speed, it overtakes those pressure waves and they start to overlap on each other. And that is what creates a shock wave. Now those shock waves we hear as a sonic boom. But they don't travel that well through the air. They do travel very well through water. And if you look at the bottom picture, you can see an example of that. As the ship fires its guns, it creates a shockwave, an arc of shockwave in the water. And it's this principle that we use for medical interventions. Move on. So there's two types of shockwave at the moment. There are focus shockwave and radial shockwave. Let you hear that in the back. Okay, so next slide. So you can clearly see when we look at the impulses, the impulse demonstrated on the left is a true shockwave. It's a very sharp rise in pressure, reaching up to 100 megapascal in a very, very short period of time. Where the graph on the left shows an impulse created by this radial shockwave. Well, clearly it's not a shockwave. It's producing a tenth of the peak pressure and over a much longer period of time. So a physicist would look at this and say, guys, you cannot call that shockwave. We just click on that. So it's not a shock wave. You just left click. No, just left click and it will come up. Okay, so we can't call it a shock wave. If we click again, sorry, I'm not in control of the presentation, my colleague's helping me out here. Hence why we now refer to this as radial pressure wave therapy. Now some authors have described this as extracorporeal activation therapy because they want to further distance this from focused shockwave, true shockwave. Okay? So for the rest of this lecture, and I want you to start using this terminology of radial pressure wave because this is what you're now going to see in the literature. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to look at how radial pressure waves are generated. two main ways. Most manufacturers, guys, are using compressed air. There is a move with some manufacturers to use electromagnetic technology. Now, what I can say at this juncture is there is not one piece of published evidence to support the use of electromagnetic technology. And I've also contacted the manufacturers because I wanted to know what the energy value is that's coming out of their handpieces. Because after all, this is the most important thing, because this is what's having an influence on my patient. Not one of these manufacturers could tell me what the energy values were coming out of their machines. So we're going to stick with compressed air technology. Now how this works is that we have a compressor which produces compressed air which is released into a handpiece through some very clever valve technology. And depending on your manufacturer, this can open between 15 and 21 times. So on the new Chattanooga Falcon handpiece, the valve technology can allow air into the barrel 21 times per second, allowing the projectile, which is in the tube, to travel up and down 21 times per second. It also dictates how much pressure there is in this barrel. And that's measured in bar pressure. So you're going to hear people talking about 4 bar, 5 bar. This is a 5 bar handpiece with a 21 hertz frequency. Okay, so in here you have a projectile. It comes along, it hits this transmitter, which converts that kinetic energy into acoustic pressure waves. It's those acoustic pressure waves which have the therapeutic value on our patients. Okay, moving on. So when the transmitter hits, when the projectile hits the transmitter, it produces a high frequency, ultrasonic, we cannot hear it, longitudinal wave, and also a low frequency sonic wave, which is, and we can have a longitudinal and what's called a shear wave component. And we can have a look at those now. Yeah, I'll just click on it. Should work. No? Okay, go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, try doing that. Okay, so we've got a few sort of technical issues with regard to our sort of videos and things. Okay, so a longitudinal wave compresses pressure as it goes through. Okay, so it starts like this, and so we get compression, right? And that's important when we get onto the biological aspect. But we also get this shear or transverse wave, where it's travelling like this, up and down. Right now, that has an effect on the tissue to force it this way, okay, to move. So this is very good where you've got locked up tissue and you want to force it apart to allow oxygenated blood to get to the area. Things like myofascial trigger points. Now we're going to have a look at this a bit later, but the low frequency sonic component has been shown and demonstrated to have the more depth of penetration, therapeutic penetration. So it's this component now which is being argued to have the most value in radial pressure wave therapy. But not only does it travel into the tissue, but it can also travel back into the handpiece, which you're holding. Okay? And now, so it's very important that the handpiece is made of the right material, mixture of titanium and steel, rather than just steel on its own, and also have protection in order that it complies with a European directive for the prevention of white finger. White fingers where you get continuous vibrations in your fingertips and you lose the blood flow, and it's an extremely painful condition. So there are manufacturers selling machines on the market that have not passed that directive, and they have to advise their customers not to use their machines for more than 20 minutes at a time and a maximum of 2 hours per day. Okay, so important consideration. This handpiece, titanium, steel, and you've got nice cushioning so you don't get that effect in your fingertips. Okay, so move on. Okay, so what makes the difference? What should we consider when we're looking at purchasing radial pressure wave? So we've talked about getting compressed air. Now there's two types of compressor, either an oil compressor or an air compressor. Now air compressors don't need servicing, where oil compressors clearly do. You've got to check oil levels and valves and that type of thing. As a clinician, I don't want that. Okay, so I'd always recommend air compressors. Then you have that very clever valve technology which we discussed earlier. And then we have the projectile in the tube. And this is where we start to get the importance of critical engineering, because that bullet has to fit exactly in that tube. If there's any air that can pass, then we're not going to get the same energy requirements and the same force production. And equally, I've got metal rubbing on metal now. So if I've got a poor quality metal alloy that I'm using for my projectile, it's going to rub away. And then I'll end up with that space between. So over the life of the handpiece, we will get a gradual drop in the energy values that are being produced. Okay, so again, really important that we have good quality components which last. And then we come to what is arguably the most important part of your handpiece, and that is the transmitter. Because it's that which is putting the energy into your patient's tissue. It's that which is converting that kinetic energy into these acoustic pressure waves. And again, it comes down to the material, the shape and design of these transmitters, which determine how much energy is going to come out of this transmitter. So imagine that I'm going to strike with a hammer. Imagine this is my hammer. I'm going to strike this material here, which is steel. And if I hit that, I'm going to create quite a lot of energy. I'm going to use the same hammer with the same force, but this is now a sponge. Not so much energy. Okay, so it's really this is the real important part. You're going to get people come to you and tell you that their machine has got 5 bar and 21 hertz. I want you to say, very interesting, but how much energy is coming out of your standard transmitter? Because that is what's going to have the effect on my patient. And with a standard transmitter, for a tendon like this, the RO40, this will produce 0.38 millijoules per millimetre squared. And that's the units that we use to measure the energy. You can get another manufacturer with the same specification and a 15 mil, their version of a 15 mil transmitter, producing only 0.18 millijoules per millimetre squared. That's half the value. Okay, so hopefully that demonstrates why it's so important to have an understanding of what the energy is coming out of the transmitters. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. And here, I'm using one, we have a whole selection of transmitters. Why is that important? Okay? A lot of manufacturers will just give you their version of a standard 15mm transmitter. Chattanooga supply the RO40 and also the D20. This one, if I just unscrew it for you, if I shake it, you'll see that it vibrates as well. So not only do I get shockwave, but I get a deep vibratory massage. So this is very, very good for treating myalgia, myofascial trigger point, tight muscle profiles. But this is my screwdriver, and this is my hammer, if you like, in my toolbox. So if I just had a screwdriver and a hammer at home, I could do a few jobs around the house, but really I need a whole raft of screwdrivers and spanners as well as my hammer. Okay? So by having a range of transmitters means that we can more or less treat anything that comes through our door where radial pressure wave therapy is applicable. And if we could move to the next slide, we'll see that we've also now got a range of periactors, and these are spinal actors. Okay. So we've got a complete range of transmitters that we can use for treating tendinopathies, muscles and fascia, as well as the spine. And we're going to show examples of how we can use these transmitters in a clinical setting. Okay, move on. Okay, so now I want to just talk about the biological effects of this energy going into our patients. Now, a lot of therapists are using manual techniques, they're using exercise prescription, as well as electrophysical agents such as radial pressure wave or shock wave. These are all considered as mechanotherapies. And Huang et al. In 2013 said that mechanotherapies are all therapeutic interventions that reduce and reverse injury to damaged tissue or promote the homeostasis of healthy tissues by mechanical means at the molecular, cellular or tissue level. And what we're doing with radial pressure wave is influencing things at a cellular and molecular level. And this is referred to as mechanotransduction. If any of you want to know more about this, Chattanooga run a host of international educational webinars which you can clearly sign up to. Okay? Okay, so this mechanotransduction creates pressure within the extracellular matrix of tissue. And this pressure is picked up by little protein messengers in the cell membrane. They're called integrins. And they convey that information to the nucleus of the cell, which changes its gene transcription. So this is how we get adaptation. This is when we go to the gym or we exercise, we want to build our muscles or we want to get our tendons stronger. By putting these optimal loads, this mechanical information into the tissue, our cells then adapt to it. Okay? We also get increased permeability of the cell membrane to get better ion exchange, especially calcium, And calcium's important because it goes on to create something called cadarins. And it does a bit like it sounds like. It's calcium adhering. So this cadarins stick new cells together to form tissue. Okay, moving on. Okay, so what can't use radial pressure wave for? Something we get asked quite regularly. Okay, so I put a list of them down here. Next slide. So people also ask me about contraindications. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So, before we move on to ultrasound, we wanted to show you a clinical example of how we can use radial pressure wave to treat low back pain. Now, we were due to have a patient with us today, so I now have the opportunity to introduce you to Fred. Due to the challenging times that we're currently living in, we couldn't have a patient and maintain social distancing, so Fred has very kindly volunteered. And Fred, we've discovered, if you look here, oh dear, okay, he's suffering with a very nasty case of sacral torsion here. Okay, so we've got an anteriorly rotated ilium and quite a torsion on his sacrum. Okay, so what we would find with this type of presentation is patients may well come in complaining of low back pain radiating into the buttocks, and obviously there's all sorts of clinical tests that we can do to see this issue, like the Don-Tigny test and the Stalk test and squish test, etc., etc. Palpation. On palpation, we're going to find that the piriformis on this side is really tense and painful because it's trying to pull the sacrum back into place. Okay, so we'll see restricted range of movement on internal rotation of the femur. Also, if we come to the thoracolumbar fascia, we're going to find on the contralateral side that's going to be bound down. Now, for those of you who are not used to that, you can test it with the palm of your hand. And Fred has very nice skin. And if I was to place the palm of my hand here, no pressure, I'm just looking to glide the skin, and we find that skin slides nicely on skin. However, when I come to this, the contralateral side to where we're getting the pain, I go to slide and I find, okay, it's stuck. Okay, my hand is not gliding here. Okay, and this is showing that there's the fascia is bound down on this side. Now, before you can do any sort of mobilizations, manipulations, adjustments to get all these structures back into place, you need to release off these. Now, obviously, some of you will be saying, yeah, well, I've got these for that. And guys, they're a fantastic tool. Okay? But trust me, when they get to my age, they start to wear out. All right? So protect these. I had one therapist that I went to do an installation training for on their new RPW, She was a chiropractor, and I said, well, why have you bought it? She said, Cliff, I've got 10 years left. I need to protect these. Okay, so that's very valid reason. So if I had a patient with this presentation, I know that I'm going to find a myofascial trigger point in the gluteal muscles. Therefore, I'm going to select my D20 transmitter. But you can see here, Fred, as hard as nails, obviously works out quite hard. Okay, he's got fantastic development of those glutes, very firm. So I'm trying to palpate through here, okay, and I'm not finding that trigger point. So I want to share with you a way that you can use your radial pressure wave to find deep-seated myofascial trigger points that you might not be able to find on palpation. And what we do, we use a low frequency, 4 to 6 hertz. Generally I use 4 hertz, that's 4 impulses per second. And if I just turn the machine on here, I'll let you hear what that actually sounds like. Boot up. Okay, so I choose radial pressure wave. Now I know a lot of you have seen this new machine. We sort of did a soft launch at last year's Medica, but this is it now, and it's available, already being used in clinics. It's fantastic. Okay, and we'll look at the various features of it. But if I press radial pressure wave therapy here, we've got a lovely touch screen now, and it's much more intuitive than it was on the previous version. So here you'll see frequency. So if I highlight the frequency here, then I can simply use my dial to take it down to 4 hertz. The compressor's going now, and this is what 4 hertz sounds like. Now I'm going to turn it off. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to work across the tissue with that 4 hertz until such time as the patient says, oh, I'm starting to feel that. Now, this is now, I'm over the trigger point, but the locus, that's not the center, the locus is where the trigger point stems from. That can be as much as 4 centimeters away from where you start to palpate a myofascial trigger point. So once the patient has told me, oh yes, I'm feeling that, I change from that scanning technique to what they call a stamping technique. That's little circles, and now I'm moving along the orientation of fibers, communicating with the patient, and they say, oh, Cliffy, that is it, you're on it. Okay? Now at that juncture I will pause my handpiece. I will go back to my frequency, and I'm going to move this up to a more usable, user-friendly frequency between 12 and 15 hertz. And that sounds like this, he says. Treatment. Okay, got that. Okay? So, now I'm going to work in small little circles over that area using that 15 hertz. I'm going to apply around 2,000 shocks to that area. After I've done that, I'm going to retest. So if I had reduced range of movement, I can recheck to see now whether I've got full range of movement. If I haven't, I may choose to administer some more. So I may repeat the treatment. And again, I might set it at 2,000 shocks, continue over the same area, but probably I will pause at 1,000 shocks and then retest it. Now, one thing to consider is never give more than 6,000 shocks over one specific area. Okay? So, having addressed the myofascial trigger point here, we now need to look at this bound down fascia. And this is where we're going to start to use our new periactors. And it's a different technique from administering a radial pressure wave. We have an adapter, and these only work on the new Falcon handpiece. And we have a range of periactors. This one's called the scraper. Okay, and I fit that into my machine. Now, it's a totally different technique, because instead of just looking at home, shockwave were like this. Here, we just want to get that tissue, that fascial tissue, to glide. So we're going to work at about a 45-degree angle, and just as if it was the palm of my hand, we're going to move this up and down here. And we use very low bar pressures. So less than 1 bar. So with our new compressor, we can use much lower bar pressures than were available to us on the previous version. And what we find is initially this gets stuck, and as we repeat our treatment, and we refer to these as tracks. So we'll do 3 to 5 tracks up and down here. We might move to the next level here and do 3 to 5 tracks along there, but suddenly we're going to find it gives, and it moves nice and slowly. Now, what I found is that you can actually get cavitation, i.e. that popping sound where bones are sort of realigning. Okay, so I've actually gone back to this situation here and found that the sacrum's actually back in alignment just by addressing the soft tissue. Okay, but if it still needs further intervention by your manipulation or adjustment, you can use whatever technique you like. It'd be far easier to get back into place having prepared the patient with your radial pressure wave. Okay, so this patient had come in complaining of low back pain, yet we'd found all this dysfunction in the sacroiliac joint. But remember, the spine is sitting on top of the sacrum, so if the sacrum's twisted, the poor old spine's going to be twisted as well. So we could well present here with pain emanating from these lower spinal segments. So how are we going to address these? We're going to now swap from our fascia to our new spinal actors. And we have 3 in the range. This is the large one for the lumbar spine. You've got a slightly smaller one for the thoracic spine, and an even smaller one for the cervical spine. Now, with the fascia and the scraper, we don't use gel because we're not trying to transmit a radial pressure wave into the tissue. Remember, we want this to glide. However, we do want to provide a shock wave or radial pressure wave with this transmitter, so we do use gel. And why is it shaped like this? because now look guys, it fits very nicely across the paravertebral muscles. We're avoiding those spinous processes which, if you went over those with a radial pressure wave, would be extremely uncomfortable for the patient. Okay? So this works really nicely to get into that paravertebral tissues either side of the spinous process. Okay? So we use a gel. Obviously I'm not going to use gel on poor old Fred here, and we administer in the same way as we would our shockwave, but we keep this still now. Okay? So then that completes my treatment of Fred, and he gets up feeling absolutely wonderful, pays me an extraordinarily large sum of money, and we shake hands and part company. Okay, having given him some home exercise. I'm being flippant, but you get my understanding hopefully. Okay, so Craig.
Yes.
Have you got any sort of questions with the thing?
Okay, so first of all, the new machine looks great.
Oh, I think
and the new handpiece that you showed me, so it's a brand new handpiece and it goes below 1 bar pressure, so you can use the new treatment heads as well with them.
That's correct, yeah.
What other features are new with the machine?
Okay, well one of the things that I really love about this, because I work in London, okay, and floor space is exceptionally expensive in London. So we now have a much smaller footprint than we had with the other. And I know it sounds daft, but actually that's sort of, in a way, saving me money, because I've got additional floor space available. So that's great. I love the look. I love the look. I've been a Chattanooga user for years, so I've always sort of had the branded colours. But moving to this sort of new black and white really brings it into a modern era. I love the new screen. The screen is a true touch screen, where the last one was a bit more of a press screen. If I just stop this so that our cameraman can see it all sort of working. Okay, it's much more intuitive. I can like before, I can store protocols and I can store patient information on here, and I can Bluetooth that to the new Chattanooga app. Okay, so if I have a protocol on here which really works well for my SIJ patient, okay, I can then transfer that to the app, and if I have other clinics, I can then send that protocol to my other clinics so they can benefit from my experience and the protocol that I found works for this patient.
Okay, so when you create the protocol, you can share that with any other Chattanooga machines. If you have multiple of them in different clinics, you can share that same one when you find something that works.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Okay, so that works really well.
Okay, excellent. Next question. It looks incredible, as we said. How do you look after it?
Okay, yeah, it's a great question. Okay, so I said that if you have an air compressor, it doesn't need much servicing. It doesn't need you on a daily basis check things like oil levels and seals, etc. Okay, so the compressor part you can just leave. Maybe once a year when you get your engineer to come and check all your other Chattanooga equipment, they can check inside, make sure nothing's come loose, but that's it. What you have to do is, after 1 million shocks, you have to change the barrel and the projectile. Okay? And that's very, very simple to do. In fact, if I show you on this handpiece here, look, I take off the transmitter. If I unscrew the barrel here, here's the barrel. It comes complete with a little Allen key which goes in that hole, and you literally pull and twist and the tube comes out. you have a replacement tube and you reverse the process. Okay, you put your Allen key in the tube and you press it down until it's fully home. The transmitter, you tap out and throw away. You get a new transmitter, which you simply drop into place in there. Okay, and then screw it back together. All right, put your handpiece back on. Now, something else to consider, if we just come over to this table here, is to look at, while you're doing that, is to look at those transmitters. Put them somewhere where the cameraman can see them. I hope you can see that. So one thing that we need to look at is these O-rings. Have they become perished? And you'll see that because they'll be white and have little cracks in them. And you're given a pot of these O-rings so that you can replace them. But for the thing for you to have a look at is the end here, where the bullet strikes the transmitter. Here is brand new. This is the good. On here, you'll start to see some wear where the transmitter has started to make an indentation into the transmitter. This is the bad. And this, to finish that analogy, is the ugly. You'll see that not only we've got a big indentation here, we've got the effects of the transmitter, the projectile mushrooming against it. Okay? And that's been caused by someone putting the wrong O-ring on when they did their service. Okay? So this definitely needs changing. So they're the things to watch for. Okay?
And in terms of cleaning the unit, how do you clean it after you've used it with a patient?
I'm glad you said that, because that's such an important part. Okay? Your handpiece, the life of your handpiece, will be significantly elongated if you get into the habit of cleaning your handpiece daily. Okay? So this to me is the Rolls Royce of handpieces. Okay? And just like a Rolls Royce, it does need looking after. Okay? So the most important thing when you enter the clinic in the morning is to put the kettle on. Okay? So that's an English thing. Get ready for your coffee, get ready for your tea. While the kettle is boiling, come in, get your handpiece. Unscrew the transmitter. Unscrew the barrel. It comes complete with a wire brush, which you simply place in the end and push through 2 or 3 times. Now remember, we've got metal on metal, and the metal will wear. So we're going to build up little iron filings. And in the end here, this is magnetic. So just tap out your projectile, which I've done here. Then get a cotton bud, or you can get a tissue and just wind it up and just move it around in there. It comes out, trust me guys, it's going to be black. Okay? Just because we've got all these little metal iron filings in there. If you allow those to build up, that's where you'll then start to have issues with your handpiece. Okay, so take that daily little measure, and you won't have any problems at all. And then you simply just screw the whole thing back. The whole process is taking you a few minutes. Put that out. By which time the kettle has boiled, and you can go get you can go enjoy your tea and coffee. Yeah.
Excellent. And how often do you clean the transmitters?
So the transmitter, you don't need cleaning. Okay? Just ensure, well, okay, I'm going to correct myself there, because when I say cleaning, ensure you're going to use an ultrasound, a water-based gel medium. Remember, shock waves travel really well through water, radial pressure waves really well through water. Okay, so they can build up in there. So just take your transmitter out. You might well find that the gel has sort of dried around there. So just simply wipe it off with a damp cloth. And your D20 comes into two parts. And again, you may well find that the ultrasound gel is around here. If you allow that to build up, guys, it will stop that rattle. Okay? So you're sort of effectively losing one of the functions of this very clever transmitter.
And then the final question, I've heard that it's supposed to be quite uncomfortable. What can you do to make it more comfortable for your patients? And what is that white thing over there that you're pointing at?
Okay, so, yeah, now, on this point of discomfort, this is a big misnomer, and I'm glad we've got the opportunity of addressing it today. Look, for radial pressure wave to have an analgesic effect, it needs to be a noxious stimulus. Okay? In response to a noxious stimulus, the body releases substance P and CGRP, that's calcitonin gene-related peptide. These are neuroinflammatory markers. Okay? In response to that, we get localized increased blood flow. And this has what they call a washout effect. Okay? All that extra blood reduces the chemical irritative nature of substances like histamine and serotonin, bradykinin, all those things that give our patients pain. So we get, in the pain research on this, they show that we can get an analgesic effect within 2 to 5 minutes of treatment, lasting 2 to 4 weeks. Okay? So that's great. That gives me now, as a therapist, a window of opportunity to address the issue sort of pain-free. So now I can do my exercise, I can do my manual therapy, I can do my movement control, all the things that I want to do where pain may have been a prohibitor before.
Okay. And when you're putting it on the patient, does it have, like the old machine, a feature where it gradually increases the pressure?
Yeah, and that's really important, okay, because when it comes to having an effect with radial pressure wave, what we know now from the research is radial pressure wave work for a multitude of pathology. Great study by Schmitz et al., a systematic review published in 2015. They took 365 pathologies and found radial pressure wave had an 89% positive outcome. Okay? Where we need to go now with research is what is the optimal protocol. Now, Schmitz et al. Said at the time of publication, the optimal protocol appeared to be 2,000 shocks administered once a week at the maximum tolerable intensity. Now, that's obviously going to vary from patient to patient. Okay? So I found, from my experience, maximum tolerable intensity ranges between 4 and 5 bar on the Chattanooga machine. Okay? But if I try to start at 4 and 5 bar, I'm never going to get my patient to accommodate to that. Okay? So if I came to you and I started bam, 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 like this, okay, your immediate reaction is, oh, pull away, that's painful, don't like it, your brain's on protective mechanism. So what we've got here now is the new comfort mode. And it starts at a tenth of the value that I've entered on the machine. So if I want to attain 4 bar, it automatically starts at 0.4 bar. And it's defaulted as on, because it's that important. Okay? So it's going to start at 0.4 bar, which is like this. Okay? Patient likes that. Okay? And gradually, during the treatment, it's going to gradually increase the pressure. Automatically. I haven't got to touch the machine. Okay? I can concentrate on my patient. And because we're building it up slowly, the patient can accommodate to it. And this is then how we get to those maximum tolerable intensities. Because at any point along that journey to my 4 bar, or my 5 bar if I get there, my patient's allowed to tell me to stop. That's their limit. Okay? Now, this is a unique and patented function. The comfort mode is a unique and patented function on the Chattanooga radial pressure wave machine. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I think you mentioned, you
Yep.
said about this. I know it looks a strange contraption. This is actually an optional extra. It's called the V actor, HF for high frequency, because we can go from frequencies of 1 hertz to 50 hertz. Now, I can't sort of see if I take this back. I'll just stop this treatment and exit, and I'm going to go to the V actor now. Okay, so here's the frequency. Look, it defaults to 30 hertz. If I press frequency, it highlights. Look, I can take it all the way down to 1 hertz. But I can't think of any clinical application where that would be of benefit. Okay? So we need to be working at least 20 hertz. Now, between 20, I told you it was a good screen, very sensitive, up to 35 hertz, we can increase tone. So if we have a hypotonic muscle, we can actually increase tone within the muscle. Okay? Very good for certain patients. If you're working in a sport setting, you would use that range for increasing blood circulation, exciting the neural system, increasing tone within the muscle. So it's preparing you for competition. On the old V actor, that's where we had to stop. Okay? We can also use that range, I should say, to prepare somebody for shockwave. Okay? If we've found, I've had patients seriously where anywhere that I've touched them on their back, Fred's quite good. I think Fred's actually fallen asleep that we've given him such a good treatment. But anywhere I touched her on the back, she was in agony. God, I'm not going to be able to go straight for shockwave on that. Okay, so I can use my V actor, okay, to desensitize the area prior to using my shockwave. Okay. If I go back here, if I use a range between 36 and 50, this has the opposite effect. So it reduces hypertonicity. So if I have a patient who comes in with a really tight hamstring, let's say, and we've ruled out there's no strain in there, it's not a neural, it's not being referred from the back or the sacroiliac joint, okay? This is protective muscle spasm. Then we can use that range to release the tension off this muscle. Okay? It's a very, very nice treatment. Patients love it. Let's have 3 heads. You have 2 standard, the 25 mil here, and let's see if I haven't got the bigger one with me, okay, but then we've got the 40 mil for bigger muscles, and you do have the option now of a smaller one which is 10 mil in size, okay, and if you want to hear it, it sounds like this. Don't need gel because we have a ceramic head. It slides nicely up the body and it feels fantastic. It really, really works nicely. Okay. Any other questions?
I think that's everything from me, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's covered it well. Good. Okay. So if we have any questions from the audience, contact your local Chattanooga representative. They will forward them on to myself, and I'll get back to you on it. Okay? But now we should move on to ultrasound therapy, because we have our new mobile range. Fully portable, okay? You can put it on a stand. It has magnetic fixings rather than clip-on, so it very easily fits on and off of a stand, and very secure, but very lightweight and very portable. The portability is important because there is more and more options now to use home care treatments rather than patients coming into hospitals. The therapists are going out into the community and treating them in their homes. Now, there is new medical directive published this year stating that you cannot use an earth machine. So if you've got a 3-pin plug here, you're not allowed to use, no longer allowed to use that in patients' homes. The beauty of this new machine, and again, unique feature to Chattanooga, is the earth is built into the machine. So we are the only manufacturer that's allowed to use these 2-pin plugs. So this is the only portable ultrasound that you're allowed to use in patients' homes now. You'll note I've got 2 transmitters on here. I've got 2 ports, so I can use 2 different size transmitters. Okay, so on this one, for today's demonstration, I've got a 10 centimetre and I've got a 2 centimetre. And very easy to swap between the two by pressing the applicable channel and against here. Okay, so let's just have a look now about ultrasound therapy, in particular to the treatment of osteoarthritis of the knee. That's a big presentation we see in our clinics. Okay. Now let's have a look at the technology.
Okay, so what do I need to consider when purchasing an ultrasound machine?
Okay, so the first thing we need to look at is the power and the power density that the machine produces. Okay? The new Mobile 2 ultrasound can deliver energy to the soft tissue from the skin to a depth of 6 centimetres. Okay, so quite deep, even on Fred's very firm bottom here. The latest medical device regulations stipulate that the power limitation now of ultrasound machines cannot be more than 2.5 watts per centimetre squared. Okay, so our last machine was capable of producing 3 watts per centimetre squared. Okay? And that's in continuous mode. And the maximum transmitter temperature can vary no more than plus 10 degrees centigrade. Now, these new regulations are designed to minimise the risk associated with overheating. Okay.
Is there anything else?
Okay, yeah, another important consideration is having a range of transmitters. So as I said, on my machine today I've got a 10 centimetre because I know I'm treating a knee. I've got a 2 centimetre because I also do a lot of hand therapy. A standard transmitter would be a 5 centimetre. Okay, so we have 4 different transmitters that you can then utilise around the body. And some manufacturers only give you a choice of one frequency. So they might have a 3 megahertz. Now, 3 megahertz is a frequency you use for superficial ruptures down to about 2 centimetres, where a 1 megahertz can have this depth, as I say, down to 6 centimetres. So having a machine that has both allows you to have the choice of treating superficially or deep within the tissue. Now, next one. You've gone back. Okay.
So why is there such a difference in price between the different ultrasound machines?
Yeah, great question, because there's a huge difference in price, and people say, well, why is yours this and why is that now? I'm not a salesperson, I'm a clinician, but when I looked at ultrasound machine and looked into it, I realised that what you're paying for is the crystal in here, the piezo crystal, and the quality of that crystal. Okay? Because it's this crystal that converts the electrical energy into these acoustic sound waves. Okay? But these sound waves are not emitted uniform. They're going to have peaks and troughs, especially close to the transmitter. This is called the near field or the Frenzel zone. Okay? So the quality of the crystal is measured by something called beam non-uniformity ratio, or BNR for short. And that's the ratio between the peak intensity and the average intensity in the beam. Now, as an ideal, we would want that 1-to-1. Okay? But this is a man-made crystal. And even with the purest diamond, you're going to get little flaws in there. Okay? So 1-to-1 is ideal but impossible to achieve. An 8-to-1 ratio is considered not acceptable in the medical regulations. And the industry standard now currently lies between 5-to-1 and 6-to-1 ratio. But the new crystal that we have in our new Chattanooga Mobile 2 roughly has a ratio of 1-to-2, between 1-to-2 and 1-to-3. Okay? It definitely has a minimum value of 1-to-5, 5-to-1. Okay? So minimum industry standard, but we think that most of the time it's between 1-to-2 and 1-to-3. So the very, very good BNR, one of the absolute best on the market.
So the BNR's important,
yeah.
But what else do you need to consider when you're looking at an ultrasound?
Okay, Okay, let's go back to this. So there's something as well called the effective radiating area. So the size of the crystal is sitting in here, and it's sitting in a steel case. Okay, so we can't have 100% of that area because obviously we've got to allow for the steel case. Okay, so you're going to get sort of like 99%. And this is known as the ERA, the emitting radiating area. But there is nothing to stop a manufacturer putting a 1 centimetre crystal in a 10 centimetre head. Are you with me? Okay. So just because you see that size doesn't mean to say that is the size crystal. So these are the type of questions you need to ask your salespeople. What is the BNR of your crystal? What is the ERA of your crystal? Okay, because you want the whole crystal. If I want to, and we're going to use this on our patient later, this 10 centimetre head, I want that 10 centimetre area covered on my patient. Okay. And what's important about the ERA are the 2 specifications. I want to make this sort of clear to you. There are 2 standards, and they use different methods for determining this ERA, the European versus the American, the FDA standard. And the way the ERA is measured is slightly different between the 2. So if you're comparing 2 machines, I urge you to look at the back of the machine, okay? Because an important consequence is the maximum power and the power density can be different for the same applicator if it's measured following the FDA or the European standards. Okay? So you'll find this label on the back of the machine, and it will actually tell you what are the specification standards of that machine, so you can do a direct comparison. Okay.
So the BNR and ERA are things that I should be considering when you're looking at your ultrasound machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're looking for a high quality applicator that ensures best performance and longer life of the machine. So yeah, look, you might pay a bit more up front, but it's going to last a lot longer over the period of its lifetime. A good understanding of the technology is mandatory when you're comparing product performances, and over time and use, the applicator performance does deteriorate slowly. It's a man-made crystal. It does slowly deteriorate. Okay? How quickly is determined by the crystal quality. Okay? So again, buy a good quality crystal, it's going to last a lot longer. But that is why, because of that deterioration, it's why most professional bodies tell you to have your machine checked once a year by an engineer, okay? And they will measure the output to make sure it's correct. Okay? Okay, so why don't we look at an example of using ultrasound for osteoarthritis in the knee. I know it's
it's an area I get lots of OA patients in my clinic, so
okay.
Definitely area of interest.
Okay, so let's have a look at the parameters we use. Okay, so OA knee is an inflammatory condition. Okay, so an inflammation is part of, and arguably the most important part of the healing process. In a traumatic event, it starts within a few hours of trauma and reaches its maximum around about day 1 to 3, followed by a gradual reduction over the next few weeks. It's controlled by cytokines, and there's nearly 100 of those identified. We look at things like interleukin-1 and interleukin-6, both of which are pro-inflammatory markers. We also have things like matrix metalloproteases develop, and these degrade and remodel degenerative tendon. So you're going to find those in a repairing tendon. So managing and facilitating this essential process is preferable to preventing it. Okay, so don't take non-steroidal anti-inflammatories to prevent that. Okay, in the acute stage, but rather intervene with things like ultrasound, which is considered as an inflammatory optimizer. Optimizes the whole thing, and we'll show you how that happens. So there's a lot of interest into stem cell research now, and it's increasing at a phenomenal rate. Once we believed that stem cells only occur in embryonic tissue, but they've now identified that we find them in adult tissue. And how much more of a functional repair would ensue if stem cells were encouraged to differentiate into specialized cells rather than a normal scar tissue we produce. Okay? Instead of scar tissue, why don't we have sort of new collagen or new bone cells or new muscle cells? Okay? But stem cells need a trigger to initiate differentiation. An external force can facilitate this, and there's been various studies, including one published in 2017 by Sang, that showed us that ultrasound is one of the things that can trigger the differentiation of stem cells. Okay, so for me, this is the most exciting part of ultrasound therapy, and why we're launching a whole educational campaign called the Rebirth of Ultrasound. Okay, moving on. Okay, so let's look at the parameters now, things like our dosages and things. Okay? So before we treat our dear old Fred's OA knee here, we need to look at make sure we're going to apply things correctly. Now, we spoke with radial pressure waves that sound waves love travelling through water. Okay? So just like we did with radial pressure wave, we're going to use a water-based gel medium. Okay? And we need to keep our head perpendicular to the tissue. Anything more than 15 degrees of angle will cause the sound waves to bounce off and not penetrate the tissue. Okay? And how often have I seen therapists chasing the gel? Okay? For me, gel is such an inexpensive part of the treatment. Yet, we mustn't waste it. It's running down here, so let's go chasing it and scoop it back up here. Okay? We're no longer giving the patient treatment. Okay? We need to keep this in contact with the skin. If you need more gel, okay, if you haven't put enough on, just have some readily to hand and squirt it on and continue your treatment rather than going to chase it. Okay? So then we're going to work in small oscillatory movements. Okay? This is because the biological effects are due to cavitation and standing waves. But standing waves can occur when sound waves are travelling into the tissue. They hit a tissue interface and they bounce back. And then they interfere with the sound waves coming down. Okay? And they can cause cellular damage. So if I was just to keep it still, okay, I could potentially cause cell damage. So that's it. Okay? Small oscillatory circles staying over the area that you want to treat. That's not playing noughts and crosses because we're bored. Drawing pictures, wandering it all around like this, which I see therapists doing. Okay? So, if we have a larger area like the knee, and we're gonna look at that, you'll start here, administer your amount of time of treatment, and we're going to deal with that. Then move on to the next area and work in small area. And then move on to the next area and the next area. The alternative is you can cover the whole area, but make sure that you keep it moving over that whole area up and down using a scanning technique so you don't miss any of the affected area. Okay? Good. If we could move the slide on one. A very clever guy, poor guy in the background here, you can't see it, we'll give him credit at the end. He's absolutely running around like a mad thing helping us out because we've got social distancing and keeping people to the minimum. Okay, so look, let's stick with the knee at the moment. Okay, and I've got a nice MCL strain here. Okay, my patient has presented with a grade 2 MCL strain of the knee. He did it 3 days ago, so very acute presentation. Okay, so going to need some clever clicking now. So, is this the right type of patient to use ultrasound? Okay, and if we click, it should say yes. Is this the right time of healing? It's acute presentation. So, yes. Is ultrasound the right choice of modality for this patient? Yes. Okay. So the last thing is we've got to ensure, are we going to use the right settings? So our clinical decision making revolves around, is this superficial or a deep structure? Okay, so this is an MCL, we know it's quite superficial. Okay, so are we going to use 1 megahertz or 3 megahertz? Okay, and obviously we're going to use 3 megahertz for superficial. So, click that. Okay, click again. So, acute, subacute or chronic. It's 3 days old, so this is a quite, still an acute presentation. So we've got now to choose our duty cycle. In other words, our pulse mode, our ratio. Okay? In the UK we refer to it as, say, 1 to 4. In America and other parts of Europe they'll use 20%. It's the same thing. It's on for 20% of the time, it's off for 80% of the time, or it's on for 1 and it's off for 4. Okay? So we're going to use a duty cycle of 20%. Now, the intensity we want to use is quite acute presentation. So we're going to use between 0.1 and 0.2 watts per centimetre squared. Okay? For some reason they've got lost off the slide. 0.1 to 0.2 watts per centimetre at the site of the lesion. Okay, that's not at the skin, because as soon as it goes through the skin, that sound wave is going to attenuate. We have what's called a half-life value. That is the depth at which half of the amount of intensity you put in at the skin occurs. Okay? So in order to get 0.2 watts per centimetre squared, we're going to dial into our machine 0.24 watts per centimetre squared. So now we come to treatment time. Okay? Now let me say, let's pretend this is a 5 centimetre head, okay, rather than a 10 centimetres. Save me getting the 5 out. Okay, so if I had a 5 centimetre head on an MCL, it's going to go in 1, 2, 3 times, and I want 3 minutes worth of treatment. Okay. Because I want 1 minute per treatment head, and it fits in 3 times. So I want 3 minutes worth of treatment. Now, in order to get that, press again and again, I need to apply this for 15 minutes. And a lot of people on their camera now will be going, 15 minutes? Well, why not 3 minutes? Okay. Remember, we're using a duty cycle of 20%. It's on for 20%, off for 80%. So in 1 minute, it's actually only on for 12 seconds. Okay? So in order for me to get 60 seconds, 1 minute's worth of treatment, it has to be on this area for 5 minutes, 5 times 12. Okay? And I've got 3 of those areas, so 3 times 5 is 15 minutes. Okay? That's how you work it out. Good. Okay. Hopefully that's made that a lot clearer, because that confuses a lot of people, and perhaps explains why some people don't get the success that they should do with ultrasound treatment. Okay, moving on. We're okay? Yeah, just waiting for my slide to go. I'm going to introduce you to Mark at the end. This man needed a 3rd pair of hands today. Okay, so let's look at the sort of evidence for OA knee, because clinicians I talk to around the world are not using ultrasound for OA knee, yet the evidence for it is quite good. Do you want to go click his thing, or you click it? Okay, so look, there are currently 150 published research trials completed for using ultrasound on osteoarthritis of the knee. And a large number have found highly significant improvements for pain, function and quality of life. And the future of ultrasound in OA treatment may lie in its apparent influence on chondrogenesis. That's according to a review by Rothenberg published in 2017. But I know, Craig, that this is your area of interest. So have you got any sort of studies that you can share with us?
Absolutely, yeah. So from my point of view, obviously, like we spoke about before, I get lots and lots of OA patients in my clinic, and alongside sort of manual therapy, exercise therapy, advice for my patients, I've been looking at other things that are out there. And I was given access to IDJO, which has all of the studies on them.
Yeah.
So I've been looking through some of the studies, and there's a couple that I've sort of picked out, randomised control trials, which I've put in here, which I think are kind of really useful.
Okay, well, let's have a look. Not all 150, I hope.
Not all 150, no. So I've only picked 2 to go through.
Okay.
So the first one that I picked was from Wu et al. In 2019. So they looked at 15 randomised control trials. They looked at the randomised control trials, and then they did a meta-analysis of those. So in total there was 1,074 patients, so 562 in the OA group, 512 in the control, so a really, really big sample size, which is really good. In terms of outcome measures, they're looking at the VAS scale, so pain, WOMAC for pain and physical function, they're looking at active range of motion and 50 metre walk time. So in terms of the studies that they actually looked at, they found, in terms of their results, that ultrasound was significant at relieving pain for their patients, and also at improving their patients' physical function as well, and increasing active range of motion as well. So their conclusions that they drew was that firstly, ultrasound is safe, which is one of the key things to consider, but then also that it's a safe treatment for relieving pain for OA patients, for improving their physical function, and for helping with their range of motion as well. So it's really, really promising results.
Yeah, they're quite extraordinary findings, actually, aren't they? I mean, especially when they're including things like strength, but that's presumably because if you relieve the pain, then we will get much better outcomes for our strengthening exercises.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the second study that I picked out, which is another randomised control trial, if you can switch to the next slide. Which was looking at 645 OA patients, so this was from 2016, and again using very, very similar outcome measures to the VAS scale, the WOMAC scale, 50 metre walk time. Again, they looked at sort of 10 studies for therapeutic ultrasound, and they found that it showed a positive effect on pain, so again sort of reinforcing the study that we just looked at a second ago, helping to improve physical function as measured on the WOMAC scale. And they found that both 4 and 8 week treatment sessions were effective, so treating people over both 4 weeks and then also longer treatments over 8 weeks, treating them sort of 3 times per week. They found that that was effective for their patients. So again, really kind of promising evidence showing that actually ultrasound could be a great adjunct to use alongside our other treatments. So what I've sort of planned from today is I was hoping we could try one of those out. So I've picked one of the studies, and if we can switch to the next slide, it should have the treatment parameters that I've picked out from one of those studies, and then we can apply those using this machine.
So this was a study using the Chattanooga machine?
Yes, so this was using the Chattanooga machine.
Oh, fine. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so talk me through it, and we'll treat Fred.
Okay, perfect, excellent. So in terms of the actual treatment that they used a pulsed ultrasound. So a lot of the studies compared continuous and pulse. A lot of them found that both were effective, but some of the studies were found that pulse was more effective for their patients at reducing pain. They found all of the studies used 1 megahertz, which would fit with, as you were describing, those deeper structures inside the knee. In terms of watts, some of them were using a range between 1 to 2 watts per centimetre squared. In terms of joules and energy, 26 centimetres squared. The treatment time they were doing for the one student that I was looking at, that I picked out here, was a 12-minute treatment session. They're looking at sort of acute presentations. They were sort of recommending that you treat either daily or sort of 3 times per week minimum. And for the chronic ones, you treat them sort of less often, maybe twice a week.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I get that in my clinic with the acute presentation. If you can, it's a question of lower energy, but more often. So if you can encourage the patient to come in 3 to 5 times a week. And you know, people look at me and say, well, you know, really? And I say, yeah, because it's going to take you that number of treatment. So if I can condense those, then I can really relieve your symptoms much quicker. If I only do it sort of once a week, I will have an effect, but it's going to go on you know, for a longer period of time.
Absolutely.
And then for a chronic condition, because let's face it, I mean, I don't know about you and your clinic, but mine certainly seemed far more chronic than I had a very privileged career in elite sport, so that was you know, a lot of acute stuff, but since going into private practice, you know, a lot more chronic. We use a bit more energy, but
less often.
Once a week. Okay, great. Okay, so the area to be treated then, we will cover for Fred in our ultrasound gel. Okay, and we're going to work the whole knee, so the anterior.
So some of the studies were slightly different. The one that I've chosen the treatment protocol for, they were doing the anterior, posterior, medial and lateral, so they used a longer treatment time.
Okay, across the patella?
So they avoided the patella in that study, but anterior, posterior, medial.
Oh, that's great, because I must admit that I've been generally treating along the lateral and medial joint lines. So to know that we actually cover the whole area, that's the anterior, posterior, medial, lateral parts of the knee, excluding the patella. That's really interesting. Okay, so depending on the size of our head, so this was a 10 centimetre head which they used in this study. That to cover that whole area is going to take me about 12 minutes. Yeah, and therefore I suppose if I had the standard 5 centimetre, it's going to double the time.
It would be a longer treatment.
Okay, so I'll double the time to get the same amount of energy in. Okay, perfect. Okay, well done. Excellent. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I've learned a lot from that. Okay, well, look, that sort of concludes our time, really. I do hope you found that sort of useful. It's certainly been a really new experience for us to do this live for you. Obviously, we regret we can't be with you face to face in Dusseldorf, but let's fingers crossed for 2021. Okay, so look, that simply leaves me to thank you very much indeed for giving up your time this afternoon or evening, wherever, morning, or wherever you are in the world. Okay, so thank you for that. I'd like to thank Craig Wilson very much for his time coming in to help me today. A big shout out to Mark at the back, who's been running around and needs 3 pairs of hands, so a big thank you.
One question.
And we have a question apparently, sorry.
Can't say his name, Ihor. He says, hi Cliff, superb presentation, well done, thanks. How long does any transmitter live, or how long does the transmitter last?
Okay, so thank you. I've got a question asking about how long does the transmitter live, the life of the transmitter. Okay, so the answer to that question is roughly, I mean, the manufacturers will tell you to change it after 1 million shocks. Okay, I've known transmitters lasting 10 million shocks. And that's why I showed you the good, the bad and the ugly. Because worst case scenario, you're hitting it 21 times per second at 5 bar for 6,000 shocks on every patient. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that. Okay? So there's not a set number. Every time that you clean it and check the back and look for that good, the bad and the ugly side. Okay? When it starts to get bad, then you need to start thinking about changing it. The ugly you definitely need to change, because the energy coming out of that transmitter is not what the manufacturers had intended it to be. Okay? So look guys, we didn't allow many time for questions, but I do reiterate, if you've got any questions, please submit them to me through your Chattanooga representative. They will get forwarded to me. I will answer them, I assure you. So again, just to finish, I wanted to thank Mark for all his behind the the scene's efforts. We couldn't do without it. And of course, a big thank you to Fred, for which we couldn't have done any practical demonstration. All right. So thanks once again. Absolute pleasure. Hope to see you at Medica next year. In the meantime, thank you very much and goodbye.